near someone with a cup, go ahead and cheers them. Clink. I'm here with Maurice Broaddus. This is my friend, colleague, and co-host for this adventure that we're calling Regroup.
Sounds great.
Thank you for being here tonight. We're gonna do a few different things. You're here because I think you're here because you're maybe call yourself a full-time creative or want to go that direction. And in 2020, we're all kind of like, hey, what's happening anymore? And we know we have a whole community of other creatives out there. And secondly, this thing is just kind of, there's some things that we're tired of. And Maurice and I have the belief that when we're at a breakdown moment, we get the chance to look at some of the pieces on the ground and decide which ones to pick up and move forward with. That's our heart coming into this. And
I think part of that is whenever I see systems break down or whenever there's breakdown of any sort, hi, I'm Maurice. But there's opportunity there too. I mean, I could wallow in the nature of I could just wallow in the state of collapse, or I could have a mindset of, hey, where's the opportunity in all of this? So
that's right. Also, we're here in the IAC offices, which have automatically shutting off lights that are also motion detectors. So if you see us waving our arms around, don't panic. Want you to see us. So today, Maurice is actually our guest of honor today. Every Tuesday that we're here, we're going to have a different guest of honor, but you're going to be stuck with Maurice and I every time. So awesome. To kick it off, Maurice is going to talk about kind of one of his big ideas that's carried him through, I think, is that long-term planning and longevity is critical. And that's hard to do right now, I think. If you agree, send me a reaction from Zoom. So we're gonna hear from Maurice, and hopefully the point is that you're kind of pushed to the edge of maybe what you're ready to, some of these ideas are maybe uncomfortable. Maybe if they're not uncomfortable yet, try and make them uncomfortable, right? Like really press into some of the things that you think about, see where it lands right for you or where it doesn't. Then we're going to get into breakout groups, and you guys can talk about this on your own. Process it. What do you agree with? What don't you? What works for you? What are you going to take away, or what are you going to leave here? And that part's not going to be recorded. That's all you. Maurice and I are not going to be listening in on that. We will record Maurice's interview, so you can send this to your friends when you're like, hey.
Send it to your friends.
Yeah, you need to hear this, dude. And then there is homework to this too, because this stuff is meant to be real life applicable. So we have a few options of how you want to do this homework. This is really up to you. No one's going to be grading this, but if you want to get out everything you want out of this, if you want to get the most out of this, would encourage you to take advantage of the homework options to make this land home. We also will be continuing this discussion on Facebook in the Indiana Creatives Facebook group. Did I get that right, Jasmine? And Jasmine, if you would, drop that link in the chat of the Indiana Creatives Facebook group. And Maurice is going to keep that conversation going there. So feel free to tag other people who you think would be interested in it too, or keep asking Maurice questions or keep asking each other questions. What else do you want to say about Regroup before I dive into community building?
That sounds good.
Okay. Okay.
I'm an easy audience, so I'm just there. Like, all right, go ahead, Anna. Go ahead.
This is why I chose you. Oh gosh, don't even do that. Choose a co-host that will push you. Does anyone have any questions about what this tonight could look like, or any questions about how to use Zoom? Cool. You guys are all, I think, pros by now. So feel free to use the chat with reckless abandon. Keep it civil, but really, if you have thoughts or questions, throw them in there while we're talking, and then we'll definitely have time for questions at the end. Okay, I'm gonna share a document on my screen now, and I want to know if actually I'm gonna share a document because this is a conversation that is about real life and about kind of some of the way we're processing feelings or plans for the future. here are a few things like, what do you want this to be? And what are you willing to put into this? Here's what I promise. And if you are going to be in this, I would love for you to be kind of in on these ideas as well. If you have anything else to add, please shout it out. But first of all, during regroup, let's all agree that you belong here. I'm talking to you, every single one of you. This experience is most useful for independent creatives who want to make their artistic practice, creative career, or creative business even more purposeful during 2020. It doesn't matter what your creative experience is or your career experience. It doesn't matter what kind of creative work you do or what your personal life is like. You belong here. Will you believe that? That's the first step of this being a valuable experience. Secondly, will you agree that possibilities are better than answers for this conversation? We are united by our belief in the power of the artistic process. So what's true for you might not be true for someone else, and our differences are going to make us a more resilient ecosystem. Science. You may not leave each session with answers, but we hope that you leave with more possibilities. Third, will you agree to stay curious and stay genuine? When you hear something that you don't agree with, not if, but when, please don't shut down.
When, just emphasizing, go ahead.
Please stay open. Please maybe write down what didn't sit right and ask others what you thought or what they thought, sorry. And maybe be open to changing your mind. That also means that you are honest with yourself. Don't fear being wrong. Don't fear putting your own answers out there. Remember, you already belong here. And remember that regret reveals things that need to change. You do have a mind that can learn and grow. And we decide what we do with this information, right? You decide what to do with it in your own life. So it's okay if you hear something that's not true for you. Finally, this is one that you've heard before if you've been part of IAC staff, but stories stay and lessons leave. So if someone's story is theirs to tell, your story is yours to tell. The guest speaker session is recorded and is going to be posted online, but the breakout sessions will not be. So you have at least that kind of privacy with that small group. Does anyone have any questions or other things to add or ways that they want to modify, adjust these thoughts?
I think those sound great. Good starting point.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool.
Covers
Okay.
a lot of aspects. Good foundation.
Thank you all. Okay. Well, let me introduce you to my friend, Maurice Broaddus. Maurice.
Hi.
I'm going to, actually in just a moment, I'm going to show you some of his credit roll.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Maurice, will you answer this question in one word?
Mm-hmm.
How do you plan for the future when everything feels broken?
One word.
One word.
Gamble.
Awesome. We're going to keep unpacking that. We're going to keep unpacking that.
Okay.
Tell me about your life right now. How do you spend your time?
So I spend my time basically divided into 4 fronts. Family. I live here in town. Wife of 20 years. 2 boys. One a senior in high school. One a sophomore in college. It gets a little tricky due to some of their antics, what grades they're in. I'll just tell you that now. My mom just moved in with us. So family is one sphere. I'm a teacher over the Oaks Academy Middle School. So we're doing in-person teaching over there. So I am a part of that faculty, working with the resource room, helping out with a math class, helping out as a librarian, and basically, just wherever they need me during this crazy, crazy time.
And we should say, did we say that we are in Indianapolis? Both of us are in Indianapolis right now. Did we say that?
I'm in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lots of people on this call are from all over Indiana, which is awesome. Throw it in the chat if you want. Where are you from in Indiana? Anyway, continue.
Let's see. I'm also the resident Afrofuturist over at the Kepler Institute. And the Kepler Institute is a grassroots community organization. We use a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities to help train up the next generation of leaders. So we're all about creating leaders out of young people and helping just to build the community wealth of the neighborhood, of the community. Kepler has its hands into all sorts of different pies, one of which is Cafe Creative, which is another area where I work out of. That's basically their arts entrepreneurial hub, but basically helping artists find a place where we can belong, a platform that we can control, and just basically to share experiences, leverage opportunities for one another, and basically build a community of artists that are all about building the community wealth here in town. So there's that. So, and then let's see, family, school, Capra, and I'm a writer.
Are you?
I am indeed a writer.
What do you write?
I write, so I do science fiction, horror, fantasy. My first story was published in 1999, and since then I've had over 100 short stories published, a dozen books. Oh yeah, my latest 2 books are Pimp My Airship and Usual Suspects, but it all began with Kingmaker. Actually, this trilogy, the Knights of Breeden Court trilogy, Kingmaker, King's Justice, King's War. 10 years ago, Kingmaker came out. And that began my ride as an urban fantasy author. I've had a number of different books. These are some of my novellas, including Buffalo Soldier. And I'm an editor. Yes. Oh man, that's a lot. All right, so yes, I'm an editor. I did the Dark Faith series, Streets of Shadow. I was guest editor on Nightmare, but I'm currently the editor over at Apex Magazine. I've done consulting, such as Watch Dogs 2, the only thing to ever give me any credibility with my middle grade students.
What's Watch Dogs 2?
A video game.
A video game.
So that's the only reason they have ever paid attention to me, because they're like, oh, Mr. Broaddus is a writer. And so, yeah, they don't count the short stories or the novels or anything like that. But no, I worked on a video game. Okay. Mr. Broaddus has some credibility. So, okay, got you. And then, like I said, I've had 1 or 2 short stories published. So this is going to go on for a bit, just so you know.
I know it is. It's okay. We're
okay.
just going to keep talking while all your credits roll. Well, I see you most often when you're not, like, I see you most often in our neighborhood, outside on your porch or on walking the streets. Tell me what that's all about.
All right, well, the walking the streets part, we could have left out, because if I'm walking the streets, that usually means I'm hunting Pokemon. That's basically, wait, no, hang on, I will clear, no, hang on, I can put an artistic spin on this. So as an artist, especially one with a sedentary form like writing, where I spend a lot of time at a desk, it's important that artists take care of themselves and get exercise wherever they can. Taking walks in the neighborhood is a natural outlet for me, having an opportunity to stretch my legs, as opposed to just being behind my desk.
Yes.
Not necessarily hunting Pokemon. Here we go. Oh, but the porch. So that's the thing. So we had just moved into a house in the Midtown area. I probably shouldn't give too many details, but I don't care. Stalk me if you want to. And so when the lockdown happened, one of the things I really missed was, man, these credits go on for a minute. One of the things I really missed about being out and about was, part of my writing routine involved me getting up early, going to a coffee shop, getting my writing in. And so I was just like, so I was thinking out loud one day, man, what would it look like? Man, it'd be really cool if the porch was just my coffee shop. The porch is my coffee shop. My regulars are my neighbors. So, it was a great excuse of me to get to know my neighbors. Like, now we know each other enough to wave and all that kind of stuff. So my neighbors are my regulars. And that's kind of where I had stopped with that. But I made the mistake of tweeting about that. And Twitter's the devil. We should probably all just acknowledge that. But after a while, artists started stopping by the porch. They're like, "Hey, is the coffee shop open today?" And I'm like, "Yeah, coffee shop is open today. Come on through." So so then it became a meeting space for me and artists. So like several artists would just come through. We'd have these one-on-one sessions, and a lot of it, I call it's like no agendas, no agenda coffee is basically what they were. Where an artist could just come over, we'd hang out, we'd talk, and it didn't matter what their art form was. So I've had hip hop artists, other writers, some poets, some jazz musicians. It doesn't matter what your art form is. It's just a matter of that you're serious about it. So you come over, we hang out, we vibe, we talk about possibilities. Sometimes we end up in inadvertent collaborations, but it's just a matter of, sometimes you just need someone to just encourage you in times. Like I know, for example, like part of my writing routine became using Zoom as my accountability. So I would get up in the mornings, and then from 10 until 2, there were a couple writers here in town who we'd all get on Zoom together, and we didn't necessarily talk or anything. It was just nice to have other people in the space, all of us like-minded, just pursuing our craft.
Right.
So, and that's what we did. So,
Still writing.
Yeah. So it's 10 to 2 every day.
Is that right? I didn't know there were hours at the coffee shop.
Well, no, there was hours for me doing the
That's when
writing.
you do the writing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's good.
but that's the great thing about the coffee shop, because if I don't want to be interrupted, or if I'm on deadline, or if I'm in a Zoom meeting or something like that, I go to my office.
Right.
Office. But if I'm on the porch, I consider that interruptible time. So like family can interrupt me, friends can interrupt me. I'm not on deadline per se, so it's like, hey, there's nothing going on here that can't be paused.
That's right.
So that we can be together, and I can be present in this moment.
You've still been really active in this weird pandemic time.
Oh yeah.
Even though a lot of other things have changed.
Yeah. Well, it's just a matter of figuring out how to best pivot safely during these times.
That's right. Well, so we just saw a lot of your credits there. We heard a lot more about, there's way more to your career than just what can look like the front of a book cover. What is it that you're most proud of?
In my writing career, or just
anything in your, maybe if you want to link it back to your writing, to your creative career, but
I will tie two things together.
Whatever you want.
I am most proud of my sons and the chaos that they bring and leave in their wake. And my sons were actually the inspiration for The Usual Suspects, which is the book. The Usual Suspects and Pimp My Irish are the two books I'm most proud of at the moment. So, and like I said, my sons inspired The Usual Suspects, and my journey as a creative and what that looks like inspired Pimp My Irish.
Yes. So we're talking about future here. We just talked about past a little bit. But today we want to talk about future, how to plan for future, what longevity looks like. What is your future?
What's my future? Well, on paper, I have a novel coming out every year from, what year is this now? 2020? Did I have a novel come out this year? Oh yeah, I did have a book come out yet. So I had to start this year, next year, and so through 2024, I have at least one novel coming out every year.
Okay.
So that on paper is the stability of my future. I'm locked and loaded the next 4 years.
Yeah, so 4 years, that's okay, when I think about long-term longevity, my future feels like, okay, I have solid projects, or really tangible, I know what's happening in my creative career for the next 4 years.
Yes. Sorry, that faces me thinking what happens in year 5. So yeah, that's great that I have that all planned out. And I probably ought to write the last 2 books in those, because there's 4 due, 4 coming out, and 1 is written, 1 is in final edits, and then the other 2 remain unwritten. So I know I still have to write those. But even as I know I still have to write those 2 books, it's like, all right, so what am I gonna do after that?
Right. Well, how far out do you want to see?
That's a good question. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. My whole thing is, there's 2 things that are in tension. So there's the promise I made to my wife that I would provide something stable that she could plan on. So that's just a hardcore reality.
Get that, am I right?
Right. So she because it's a lot to ask of a partner. It's like, hey, I'm gonna go out on this limb of my art, and I'm gonna trust that it's gonna pay our bills. I mean, sure, but it's another reason why I have the teaching job is
Mhm.
because that provides a certain amount of stability for us, and allows her to be a little bit more comfortable and trusting in the fact that I'm just going to be all over the place pursuing whatever tickles my fancy in any given moment. But I mean, a lot of it is just me going, I don't know what I have a lot. So yeah, so there's that tension, and then it's also in tension with the I love words, I love ideas, and I can't stop playing with those. And so I'm always in a state of, what's the next idea? What's the next possibility? What can I do? Who can I do that with? So it's those two tensions, practical reality versus, oh, I need something that's going to challenge me, that'll be different, that'll be interesting. Let's
So
go.
there's something really like innate about who you are that wants to imagine new possibilities. And so like the 5th year for you was like, oh, that's exciting. It's not scary.
Oh, no.
But
No.
what would you say to those of us who, especially right now, I have talked to a lot of creatives coming from everywhere
Mhm.
who are really freaked out by this pandemic,
Mhm.
by political unrest, by the movement for Black lives, and what kind of change is important to happen next. Like we're just in a season of change for a lot of us.
Right.
What would you say to those of us who are really just don't even know how to think about even like the next week future?
Keep creating. I mean, that's it. I mean, I have to create to stay sane.
Yeah.
And that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 examples. And so one, so my father passed away about this time last year. Right when book 1 of so I have a space opera trilogy. That's 3 of the books of the 4 in the future.
Okay.
But book 1 was due last December. But I couldn't write. I mean, my father was dying of cancer and then passed away from cancer. And I'm just like, that's a lot of emotional weight to carry, and much less to carry into the creative process, right? And so I basically turned to my wife and my agent and said, yeah, I know the story's due. Because that actually it feels a lot like that's my accountability. It's like I got the women in my life to hold me into account, my wife and my agent. And so it's like, hey, I need y'all to just trust me, but I'm not going to work on that book. I'm going to work on something no one's asked me for, but it's going to be a short story. And it's going to be a short story that helps me process my grief. And so I wrote I started writing the short story. I started writing the short story when my father was diagnosed. And then I finished the short story probably, I think, 4 days before he actually passed. And it was supposed to be a short story, but by short story, I was aiming for 5,000 words. Turns out it was about 20,000 words.
Sure.
Because I had a lot to process.
Yep.
But hey, I wrote this piece.
So you powered well in whatever way you needed to.
Yeah.
You continued to nourish what your creative work.
Writing is what I do, and a big part of my writing process is to just channel, well, not just channel, but to make sense of the world around me. Yeah. And so I'm trying to make sense of, my father's passing, and then as it turns out, I was also trying to make sense of my sister who had passed away like 4 years before.
Yeah, totally.
So, I'm wrapping all these things, which is why the story bloomed from 5,000 to 20,000 words. Like I said, a lot to process.
Right.
And so I end up writing essentially a novella.
Right.
That no one asked for.
Right.
But I said, look, I had to get this out of my system. Oh no, I think that's pretty much it. So I just had to get this out of my system. I thought I had some points, but no, I just had to get this out of my system.
Right.
And in order to clear the decks for me to be able to think clearly on the space opera. Otherwise, that space opera was just going to be about a bunch of people mourning their dead dads.
Right. So, and the thing about that is interesting is that you and I have talked quite a bit about how you make decisions, really, and like what your values are. And I think back to the story that you told me another time in your life that was you had been writing so prolifically, like it was like, I don't even think you were a full-time writer at this point.
I was not. You
were working maybe in a different industry completely and just writing all the time. And it was like, okay, this is what you're supposed to be doing if you're a writer. You're getting stuff out there. You're really hitting the pavement. But stuff fell apart during that time because
Right.
it wasn't nourishing what you were actually needing out of your life.
Right.
And when it came down to it, things broke and fell apart.
Right.
And even though you were doing exactly what you were supposed to be, quote unquote, doing as a writer,
Mhm.
just cranking stuff out, it even checked a box for you. Something I've heard you say before is like, that you're always planting these seeds,
Right.
these opportunities.
Right.
And conceivably, that's what you were doing then too. You were just producing and cranking
Mhm.
out quantity and volume, which is important
Right.
for a lot of us. But that's, when those other pieces didn't align into a way that really like nourished what you needed in your life,
Mhm.
it ended up falling apart anyway.
Right. Right. I mean, so like, man, that was like 10 years ago. So let me just peel off this scab and go back to this open wound of my life. I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, at the time, I was full-time as a scientist. I was part-time helping plant a church. And then I was trying to get all this writing done. And I'd started my blog, and ran the numbers. I was putting about 4 novels worth of words on my blog per year. On top of that, writing a book each year. On top of that, trying to write 6 short stories a year. On top of that, I was a columnist for both Hollywood Jesus and
you were knocking it out of the park in a lot of it, right? Like you were doing it.
Yeah, I was doing okay.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's what I do.
Yes.
But so I was doing all of that, but my life was out of order, and I was like fundamentally on myself. I mean, at this point, I'm like sleeping 3 hours a night, maybe. I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, no self-care, just running constantly, because I'm like, I got to get this. I have to get my name out there. I have to be building this resume. I have to, do and do and do if I'm going to make it make a success of my writing career. Well, that's all great, but that was a house of cards the way I had that thing set up. So eventually, that all came crashing down.
Yeah.
And so but that's the thing, is that when you have these things, these times of collapse, you view them as times of opportunity. And so for me, I view it, well, reluctantly. At the time, I didn't have the clarity of going, this is actually an opportunity. No, I was just all ashes and rending of garments time. But no, it was a time of opportunity. And so it's like, well, what is the opportunity? Well, the opportunity is like, all right, so my life was completely out of balance. What would it look like to build my life in balance? So, starting with, all right, so let me start with my faith. Let me figure out what that means to me. Let me figure out my family and the family situation. Let me make them the priority, because they hadn't been at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But now let me make them the priority and the foundation of what I'm doing. So I'm not just out there being a writer. No, I'm out there being a writer as an extension of family.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I draw my family into what it is I'm doing? And then start there. And so and with that as my foundation, then it's like, all right, so how do I add maybe freelance writing and try and that as a career? And then it sort of evolved after that. It's like, all right, so with faith and family as my foundation, I am a writer. Everything I now stack after this has to support me being a writer. So no matter what I do, be it a homeless ministry, which I did for a while, or a sales job, which I did for a while, or then later when I got involved with the Learning Tree, and then the Kepler Institute, and then the Oaks Academy, all those positions said, hey, Maurice, you're a writer first. So you be about that, and then we will support you. And as we support you, you support us.
So give me some specifics. How'd you blur the lines? How'd you blur the lines between, well, you told me a story about taking a job, a straight job is what you called it. And
well, yeah,
the decision-making process of, if I'm going to take this job, then what?
I didn't have to take the job, but I'd come to another crossroads point, and my wife was like, I have followed you pretty faithfully on this journey of you being an artist and living into your art. Could you, novel idea, could you get a job that involves a stable paycheck and little things like benefits? Like, all right, I guess that's not a big ask. So I got, like I said, that straight job, and it was a sales job. And, but as a sales job, I'm like, yes, I'm going to be a salesperson, but I'm still a writer first.
Yes.
And so about 2 weeks into the job, I went to my manager and said, look, I'm a writer. I'm a writer first. I'm still doing this job, but I'm a writer first. So we have two 15-minute breaks and a lunch hour. I will need 2 half-hour breaks and the lunch hour so I can get my writing done. And my manager said, no. And I was like, well, you know what? I've heard that request out loud. I hear that. I get that. So I understand your position. However, I'm going to take up smoking and take 6 breaks a day, like I see a lot of my colleagues doing. And he was like, take your 2 half-hour breaks. I'm like, okay, bet. So I end up with 2 half-hour breaks and my lunch hour. And so that's 2 hours a day that I was doing my writing because I'm a writer first. And so 2 hours a day during my peak time of creativity, I was getting my writing done. And it changed my writing practice too, in ways which, to hone that ability to be able to go, oh, time for my break, and to hit the ground running. It's like, I only have a half hour. Let me get this scene done. Let me get this scene done. Right. How far can I get into the scene? Right. It changed my practice, and the tools I learned in doing that, I've actually carried with me ever since.
Right. The other story I love, I'm sure you can tell lots of stories about this, but like
I kind of do that for a living.
You do.
So, okay.
But the story you tell about your son.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a great example to me of like how this is maybe even like a result of how you've blurred the lines between your family and your writing. Yeah. Is that your son was the first person to negotiate
that story. Yeah.
You?
So all told, my wife actually is my business manager. So she handles the money and make sure to go, hey, Maurice, you getting paid for this job? Because as it was pointed out to me recently, I just love the ideas and the challenge. So I'll do whatever for a ham sandwich. Yeah. As long as there's a challenge there and it's a creative challenge, I'm good. So this is why my wife's in charge of the money and it basically functions as my business manager. Mm-hmm. My son, however, was the first to negotiate my speaking fees.
And how old was he?
Oh, I'll get there.
Oh,
I'll get there. I was having coffee with a buddy of mine. He was a pastor. And we were just chit-chatting. He thought it'd be a great idea for me to come in and speak to his singles group about being a writer and the publishing journey and that sort of thing. And he's a friend of mine, so I didn't even blink twice about saying yes to speaking to speaking to his group. So mm-hmm. I lean forward, about to say yes and everything, and my son puts his hand in my chest and pauses me like, My father's time is worth money. So if he's going to speak to your group, he needs proper compensation. And so both me and the pastor sort of like we just turned to look at him and said, "Oh, really? My time's worth money." How much? And so the pastor's like, well, what are you thinking in terms of how much we should pay your dad? And so my son leans back and he's like, $10,000. and I'm like, oh, all right then. And the pastor didn't blink an eye. Mm-hmm. He was just like, well, we can't afford $10,000. Mm-hmm. And then the two of them end up negotiating out. And so they end up with, $200 as an honorarium for me to come speak to a singles group. And then when we get into the car, my son's like, now, if I understand everything right, I get 15% of that $200, right? And I'm like, well, yes. And actually, if you were really paying attention, you probably could have negotiated 20%. But yeah, 15% off the top goes to you.
I need to show you pictures of the fam here while you're talking.
But yeah, at the time, he was 10 years old. But it's great that, at 10 years old, he had a sense of, hey, my father's time is worth money. What my father's done, my father's skill set, my father's, ability to come in and speak to your group. No, all that stuff is worth something.
That's right. Well, and that speaks to, it speaks to like, okay, the seriousness, is that tell me, writer, is that the correct word?
Look here, you're asking the wrong dude because I will make up a word in a heartbeat.
Right. Well, with which you talk about your work, even like within your own home. Mm-hmm. And that's something that's struck me in a really healthy way.
The oldest son is the one in the white Black Lives Matter shirt.
There you go. He's the one who negotiated.
He's the one, he was not 10 in that picture. He is very much 19 in that picture.
That's right.
But yeah, he was the one who negotiated the contract.
Good old Reese.
Well,
so this is what's really struck me in a really healthy way since we've become friends is that you talk about what's what's going on in your creative work with like excitement and confidence in a way that's like, no, logically, like, yes, this is the success of my work. You just like, and that's something that I gotta tell you guys, that's not something I hear very often when I'm talking to creatives about what's going on in their creative life. It's not usually confidence and excitement. Do you feel that way? Do you feel confident when you're talking about your work or about your creative life?
I feel confident when I'm talking about writing,
Okay.
because writing is what I do.
Okay.
I love words, and I love any excuse to play with words.
Okay.
So yeah, so if you get me in a situation where I'm talking about words, I got you. I'm your Huckleberry. I will talk about words all day long. But I think part of that stems from the fact that, a while back, I decided, there's stuff that, like as a writer, there is stuff that's just flat out of my control. I can't control my sales. I can't control my, any awards it gets. I can't control, New York Times bestseller status. All that stuff is out of my control. So I need to not worry about that sort of thing. I don't worry about that. I write for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I can sit around and go, hey, no one's asked me for this novella about this 20,000 word novella, but I need to write it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll write stuff and put it away
Mm-hmm.
and not blink twice. I have whole novels that I will write and go, oh, that was a great exercise, but that one's for me. And I'll put it away.
Okay.
Pimp My Airship was actually a trunk novel. I had trunked that. I wrote it for me. I wrote it as an exercise to see if I could take a short story of mine, unpack it in a way into a full-length novel.
Okay.
And I did that.
Okay.
And then put it away. That was just something I wanted to do.
Okay.
It was only inadvertently when because since I had written it, I talk about it like it's a real thing, because it is a real thing. I wrote it. It's just not for your consumption, but I wrote it. But then when people heard me talk about the book, they were just like, where can we find this book?
Okay.
And so that's the only reason I even thought about trying to get it published, was because people were starting to ask for it. But the original plan was for me to just leave it in my trunk.
Okay, let's talk about MoCon real quick.
It's okay.
I don't know if you see the train of thought here, but I'm going to go with it.
I'm
going to pull up some photos too of MoCon. Tell us what MoCon is.
An exercise in vanity? I mean, is that where we're going with this? No, MoCon, sorry. MoCon. Well, I mean, all right, so MoCon literally does stand for Maurice Convention. I ain't gonna lie. But MoCon started, like I said, I had mentioned that I'd helped plant a church. Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I was looking at was, if I'm going to try and live the totality of my life and try and blur the line so that, not everything is operating in a silo. Right. What would it look like for me to do church or do ministry and bring it to my writing community, or vice versa? And so MoCon, it was me starting a horror writers convention, except running it in a church. Because, why wouldn't you run a horror writing convention in a church? Yeah, that got me kicked out of several churches. But it has grown and continued to grow. Like, by the time that MoCon rolled around, we were doing it out of the Switchboard, which ironically is, Switchboard is a co-working space in Fountain Square, but it also was a refurbished church. So, I still kept the streak going. But it was about a couple of things. Mostly what it was about was the whole idea of, like, I recognize that I can network really well and I can create a lot of social capital. I recognize that about me. But a lot of my friends here in town don't have those opportunities to go to conventions and meet some of the folks I was meeting. So I was just like, well, what would it look like if I brought those people in for you? I would bring in famous writers and some publishers and some editors and a couple agents, and say, hey, these are just my friends. I'll bring them into town so we can all hang out and just see what happens. And so that's what MoCon was. It was just me bringing my friends and introducing them to friends here in town, because I love those friends and I love these friends, and y'all should have plenty of commonalities together, and let's just eat and drink and talk for a whole weekend. Mm-hmm. And that was basically MoCon.
How does MoCon planning for your future?
Unintentionally or intentionally? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because intentionally it didn't. I mean, it's just something I did because I love doing it.
How's it contributed to, like, your long-term sustainability as a creative, and really a prolific and successful creative at that?
Yeah, and so that's the thing. So you talk about the excitement, and I can feel myself getting wound up now. But but that excitement is, what was I doing with MoCon? MoCon was just me doing the things I love to do.
Yeah.
So it's like, I don't have to fake enthusiasm for it. It's literally stuff I love to do. I love to meet people, and I love to hang out with my friends, and I love to eat and drink. Yeah. Do all that together. Of course, I'm going to be enthusiastic about that. Yeah. Now, how has that been the backbone to my career in a lot of ways? There's a publisher, his name's Jason Sizemore. And I bumped into him the year at a convention after I did the first MoCon. And he and I were having lunch together. And he's like, all right, so let me get this straight. You threw a convention named after yourself. You have what, 3 short story credits to your name? And people showed up. And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, but when you say it, it sounds ridiculous. But yes, that's the main thrust of what happened.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, we're going to start doing business with you now. And that was, and so I've done MoCon with the exception of this year. I mean, MoCon was like 13, 14 years in that I've been doing it.
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
This year would have been year 14.
Yeah.
It would have been MoCon 14 this year if it wasn't for the pandemic. So that's 14 years ago. But he's also the one who published Pit My Airship, the novel. Which
was really your takeoff success. Well, Knights of Bread and Court really was your takeoff success, but Pit My Airship really got a lot of publicity.
Well, he's the same. Actually, he's the publisher, editor-in-chief of Apex Magazine. So he was the one who first published the short story.
So all these things are
then
connected.
Published the novel.
And connected back to really this thing that is very much Maurice, which is getting people together in your life and in your home. I mean, you've got the porch is literally your most like frequented meeting space, basically, yes, of maybe all of Cafe Creative. That when you exploded up in the best way, like made it as big and as rich as possible, that part of your life, that started to really like push out tendrils of other things to happen.
Absolutely.
Okay. So you are, like you said, you are an ideator. You're like, I mean, and I think we're similar in this way. Like, it doesn't take much for us to get on board with ideas. You know, it's like why we're here today. But you have this other method of like filtering out what's actually right for you long term. Can you talk about that?
Well, hang on. Although that's a recent tool.
It's helpful.
Oh no, it's been real helpful. But it's a recent tool, and that's partly because things have blown up so much for me lately. I mean, even just looking at this past summer alone, when winning the Indiana Authors Award,
that's right,
or getting a project optioned by AMC to be a TV series. These aren't little things.
Nope.
And then it opened up doors so that now I'm getting all these other offers, and so it's like, oh, this is a strange spot to be in where, I don't have to chase down opportunities. Opportunities are kind of hunting me down now. And my instinct is to say yes to all of it, because I've been someone who has been chasing after opportunities my entire career,
right,
and have them come after me. My instinct is like, yes to everything.
Yeah.
But I can't say yes to everything, and not everything is a great opportunity. So I had to figure out a way to say, which are good opportunities for me, as opposed to just something to do.
And so this really starts to tie into this future building kind of activity. I mean, you've had these foundational values for maybe like 10 years or so, that you had this experience that really like identified for you this faith, family, and writing were the 3 things that were really centering you.
Yeah.
And that started the future building moment.
Right.
Was like, if my future is going to exist, then it has to be in these things.
Right.
And so you've been feeding that, and it's kind of created more opportunity for you. And I know a lot of us, I mean, that's going to be an interesting thing, I think, for all of us to talk about, is like, do I see that happening in my own life? But whatever, I'll let you guys talk about that later. And now you're kind of reaping the rewards of that. The future is now realizing itself some more because of what you fed of it earlier. It wasn't this systematic, like 5-year plan, 10-year plan,
right.
But you had this, it wasn't even like a vision. It was just like honing in exactly on what it was that was going to sustain you and continuing to feed it. So will you Will you tell us about the Matrix?
Yeah. Everybody enter the Matrix. But no, it's just this tool I'm still developing. So it's not by any stretch.
I'm going to share it on the screen, everybody.
Yeah. But I call it my matrix of opportunities. And it's just like, hey, when an opportunity pops up, I run it through the matrix. And basically it's just like 3 or 4 or 4 or 5 sort of broad strokes in terms of what I'm looking at. So yeah, so does it raise my profile? Because we're all about, some people talk about it'll bring you exposure. Okay, that's a whole conversation about what's real exposure, what's not real exposure. But does it raise my profile? Does it add additional work? Because there's stuff I want to be doing, but I don't want to be taken out of my lane. So by additional work, I mean, does it take me out of my lane? I have deadlines, I have stuff I'm supposed to be doing. So if this opportunity popping up, does it take me out of that lane? Does it pay professional rates? Because as my son taught me, my time is worth money. I have acquired skills over these 20 years that are worth being respected. So does it pay me appropriately? Or what they want to compensate me with? Does it respect me for who I am, or more importantly, who I see myself as an artist?
Yes. Because you were the one to tell that salesperson boss, I am a writer first. This is what my work life is going to be like. Right. Okay, continue.
Yeah, because I've been doing this for a minute. So I have an expertise. I have a skill set that has to be valued. And it took me a long time to be able to have the confidence to be able to say that.
Cheers to that.
Right. Or with the matrix, are the relationships tied to it? Because the one thing that's going to trump pay or exposure, all that is, are there relationships tied to it? Is it a friend coming to me and say, hey, can you help me out, or can you work with this, or hey, you want to just do something together? If there's a relationship tied to it, yeah, that's going to weigh heavily on whether or not I say yes.
And that was something that you had to identify for yourself. Like relationships is very core to who you are. Okay. Right,
because community is foundational to how I see myself and how I see my art practice. The work at Cafe Creative, it's about community wealth building, not my success building.
Right.
It's about community wealth building. It's not even my success. Hopefully it triggers your success. No. It's what can I do to help you be successful? Because if you're successful, we're all successful. So it's how do I prioritize community and the artists around me? Because, like I said, rising tide raises all ships. So if you're successful, I'm going to be successful. So are there relationships tied to it? The last ones are pretty new that I've been recently toying with, is like, I need to start managing my accessibility, because if you're sitting around saying yes to everything, then suddenly you're really visible, and that sort of like devalues the Maurice experience. Okay, I'm not as confident when I'm hearing that out loud. I'm just like, ooh, the Maurice experience, that sounds horrible. All right, so we'll chuck that. But am I? Sometimes it's a matter of like, am I too?
I think let's pause. I think that's very Maurice of you and on brand. So why don't you just keep it if you feel confident in it?
All right, well, we'll just move along. And then lastly, have I checked with anyone else about this opportunity? Because you get so used to like you yourself are evaluating an opportunity. It's like, wait, if I'm really about community, have I asked anyone in my community?
Yeah.
Do you think this is a good opportunity?
Right.
I mean, yes, I have my wife and my agent, and I do vet a lot of opportunities through them, but I also have fellow artists that I work with.
Right.
Practitioners, even if they don't even have to be other writers. They could be high-level hip hop artists, high-level visual artists. It's like, hey, do you think this is a good opportunity? So I try and vet those opportunities to other people.
So while Maurice is kind of finishing up here, I have the last question for him. Feel free to throw stuff into the chat if you have questions for Maurice. Let's chat it. And then after, I'm going to ask him one more question, and then we're going to move to breakout room. So pop your questions in the chat now. So, I mean, I will reflect back to you as your friend.
Uh-oh.
I think I see that you are happy with your life right now.
I am.
So
bordering on giddy, but go ahead. God, I love this space. I love this space of, I'm dare I say, successful.
Yes.
I'm having opportunities coming along.
Yeah.
I can leverage these opportunities for my friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and my family. So it's like, Daddy's a writer. Like, okay, now I'm a writer. But okay, go ahead.
So, did 2020 change what you were doing or feeling? And you know what I mean by 2020. You know what you know that I mean the pandemic, and that I mean
pandemics.
Tell me more.
Because I include the racial uprisings too, the rises against injustice. That was actually the second thing that I was going to talk about. So I had to write that short story handle my father's passing. I had to write something at the beginning of the uprisings because I had to process all of that. I had to process the sense of rage that I was feeling about the injustices I was seeing. Yeah. So I had to write something about that because I had more novels due, but I was absolutely stuck. Couldn't write. Why couldn't I write? Because there was stuff going on in the world that I had to process. Yeah. So I sat down and was like, all right, let me just go ahead and process that. And I ended up writing a piece, and it got published in Indianapolis Monthly. That was essentially me processing my rage at what was going on. Once I wrote that, I was like, oh, kind of cleared my system, and like, oh, I have that ability to dream again. Because I had lost it. I literally lost the ability to dream because so much was going on, and my head was just filled with all the white noise of injustice and anger and fury. But I was able to get to a space through my writing all right, let me clear the decks a bit. All right, now I can dream about possibilities. I can dream about new worlds. I can dream about, the multiverse of possibilities again. In terms of creating desired future states. I'm back to that space again. So.
And here we are. If you've never heard the word Afrofuturist before, do you want to dumb it down for us a little bit?
So Afrofuturist is looking at life through the Black cultural lens. Afrofuturism is what Black people have done the entirety of our existence. My friend Tanana Reeve Dew says it this way. I love this when she goes, "Hey, you know what? Even that very act of us imagining ourselves with a future is an act of resistance." Oh. And so, through the lens of Black art, through music, through visual arts, through literature, it's Black people imagining ourselves, reimagining ourselves, creating our futures for ourselves. We have Octavia Butler in The Parable of the Sower. We have Parliament Funkadelic and Sun Ra in the music, Basquiat in visual arts. Yeah. So it's that Black cultural lens that, so it's rooted in the past. So we have this shared sense of story that we're all working through, but it looks to the future, imagining ourselves in the future, imagining better futures for ourselves that critiques our present, but it's always about charting our way forward. So it's tales of resilience and charting our way forward, if I had to dumb it down.
Thank you, Maurice.
You're welcome.
This is fun. I get to talk to Maurice a lot. I think you can tell that, but it's always fresh. It's always different. There's a couple questions in the chat. So it's kind of rare to be both a writer and an editor. How and when did you start editing, and what do you enjoy about both areas?
Editing. Okay, so editing started as a fluke, and it started because of MoCon. Because Jason Sizemore was at MoCon, and I think by this point we're at like MoCon 4, MoCon 5, and it's like, wouldn't it be great? I mean, look at the people around us. Look at the writers who are present in this room. Wouldn't it be great if like we did an anthology with like some of the folks in this room right now? And he was like, sure, run with that. And that's what led to the Dark Faith anthology series. It was originally called the MoCon Anthology. But then we broadened it into the Dark Faith, so that because I was getting email requests from other writers who hadn't been to MoCon, just like they liked the premise because the premise was write me a story on any definition of faith that you have. I don't care if you're atheist, I don't care if you're a Buddhist, I don't care if you're a Satanist or worship out of the Norse mythology. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your take on faith. And like so many people were like, we don't get a chance to do this. Can I submit stories too? And so it kind of ballooned further than we thought it was going to. But that's how it started. That was my first foray into editing. I just got through editing an issue of Fireside magazine. And now I'm one of the current editors over. I'm the special editor over at Apex magazine now.
Yeah.
What do I love about it? I love not so much the idea of curating stories, because that makes it sound like power has gone straight to my head and I can control. So it's not so much that, but it's partly it is about providing opportunities for folks, discovering new writers, because that's my favorite thing. Is like, hey, I know I have I know I can go find and ask different friends to write stories for me. But I can also be that lens of, hey, I've seen that writer over there toiling in relative obscurity for a while. Let me give them a shot. And so that's actually what I love most about it, is like, hey, let me create platforms for other artists to shine.
Yes.
That's
That is true to who you are.
Right.
Absolutely. Lisa wants to know, when does MoCon happen every year? What month and where? I think she's going to be there.
Ideally, it's the first weekend in May every year. But and normally October is the month I start planning next year's MoCon, but I don't see this pandemic thing lifting in any sort of reasonable way to allow me room to do next year's MoCon. So next year's MoCon was probably not going to happen. But the year after, I'm feeling a bit more confident about. And so the whole idea of returning to MoCon, I suspect I will have several friends who will be anxious to make appearances at that MoCon. And so we operate out of, actually this year was going to be the first year we're going to actually do it out of the Cafe Creative space. Because it's going to be one of the launch events for the Cafe Creative space, because we're going to open up our physical space. It's like, oh, pandemic. But we'll probably do it out of the Cafe Creative space, first weekend in May, guaranteed to be agents and editors and publishers and writers of all types popping up at this thing. And what I also involve local artists, local visual artists. I like to highlight during the convention. We have a total of 5 meals that we have together as a part of MoCon. And so I usually I contract local caterers. So it's all local caterers that we hire to do our meals.
It's that community wealth. In that community, there's so much there, and just the people that getting them together and shaking them up and seeing what happens.
And just seeing what happens.
Yeah.
We even have an in-house vintner. And so, oh man, so yeah, I think she was, cause it was a Sip and Share Wines, and she was just like, oh sure, okay, I'll do your event. I'm like, hey, no, I don't think you truly appreciate what's going on. This is like 100 professional writers coming together. She's like, oh no, I got you covered. And I'm like,
It's gonna be a lot of wine.
I really don't think you do understand what I mean by that. She's like, I got you covered. She showed up Friday night. It took us an hour to wipe her out. And so she was like, okay, Saturday. No. Okay. I didn't know what I was dealing with. I'm like, yeah, come better Saturday. And so then she's been with us ever since. So yeah.
Thank you, Maurice. Anybody else have questions? Jump in there. You don't have to chat. You can say it out loud if you want to. Okay. Great. Well, I'm going to ask Jasmine to, in just a moment, send you to a breakout room. So you and a few other people, I'll throw a couple of questions in the chat box for you to kind of process through together. But we want to know, so you're going to take maybe, let's see, maybe like 15, 20 minutes, probably 15 minutes. What about this? Hang on, let me get to my notes. I want to know one word. So when we come back together after 20 minutes, I just want to know one word for everyone. How do you plan for the future when everything feels broken? What was your word?
Gamble.
Right. Okay. How far can you see? And do you want to see farther? Or why? How maybe you want to talk about, is it easier for you to set a vision or make a plan? And when might you use one over the other? And then anything else, how do you build your future? Please take this opportunity to just workshop some ideas with folks. Every time that I'm with other creatives, we love hearing each other's ideas. We are our own best resource. So know that other people value what you think. So please don't hesitate to, be bold there and share what you're thinking. This is what this time is meant, is for you to learn from each other. So I'm going to send these in the chat as well, these questions. Take 20 minutes, 15 minutes, talk about whatever you want to, honestly. But when we come back together, I want to know one word. How do you plan for the future when everything feels broken? Are there any questions? Okay.
Yeah, is that one word per person or one word per group?
Ooh, per person, probably. Everybody's a little different. All right, Jasmine, will you send us on our way? Okay, you can go ahead and hit join on that invitation she has just sent you. Okay, you can hit later on that. Cool. Everything going okay, JB?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I'm going to broadcast these questions slowly because I think they leave the chat box. So I'm just going to kind of pop them in there every couple minutes. And I can't put them all in there at once, unfortunately.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's great.
Okay, I was wondering.
I had fun.
Okay.
Did you have fun?
I had a great time.
Good.
But I always